Salam to you, venerable audience. It's time to sprinkle the sand of despondency on the tablets of dishonor, and return from the blood-soaked borders of Central Asia conquered by Genghis Khan to the Far East, where the once great empire of Georgia and the golden state of Jin continued to struggle desperately and hopelessly. The amazing thing is that Genghis Khan conquered Beijing, even more or less right in history textbooks. But then all the attention of readers moves to the west, is where he conquered Central Asia, where two loyal dogs of GBB judges opened the regions of Eastern Europe to the shakers of the universe unknown to him, reaching the greatest city kilometer me, golden domes of churches. The Mongols were seriously thinking about looking at Kiev, the other side of the Dnieper River. To go dome is made of pure gold, and simple nukers wanted to break off a piece of the roof of gold at the Russian god, but the time has not yet come about. All this can be read in school textbooks, books out about what happened at the blood banks. Yellow is practically no memory in the minds of Europeans for whom it was the past. The legend about the ancient alien hand called rank, not in the traditions of the Chinese themselves, gorge for which it was not arrogant, cruel invaders, ancestors of the monkeys magnates, she Greater China for 300, with the Qing dynasty as the dynasty today. Not only in 1911, only speaking not long ago, died last person who remembered the Qing emperors, and the very last king, the emperor, lived to be 70 years of working with the gardener at the Academy of Sciences, Chinese People's Republic of Mode itching. But it was like my emperor, I have sweeping gardens at the Academy of Sciences, yeah. So it was alien, not proved useless people. And the one time it happened that it was the Soviet School of Archaeology and the History of the Far East, headed by academician Okladnikova, became the world center for the study of this great, mysterious, desperate, heroic civilization who died in the 13th century under the impact of the Mongols, giving them such resistance like no other. Nazism, really the future of Russia's northeastern Russia, the Mongols conquered. During the winter of Ukraine, of the future again. South Russia, they were held for 2 seasons in Europe. Hungary floor for 1 year, but Empire Tink with 1211 at 1243rd year. I apologize, 1230 for year course, 23 years desperate, cruel, hopeless and relentless struggle to the last. It was a real war of annihilation, as the Mongols remembered the invasion of Gens on the steppe, their punitive campaigns of the northwestern, additional punitive administration for slaves, and loot in the Mongolian steppes when a man penetrated the brain and blood of the future leaders of the Genghis Khan Empire. And Georgie did not fight to the last, not wanting to take off the burden of the great empire of the Golden Empire. But in 1215, from which we begin our story, the affairs of the Jin Empire seemed desperately hopeless. The capital Beijing was captured by Genghis Khan in the north, was cut off and almost lost. It was torn apart by riots, incorrect generals of the Khitan uprising which formed in Manchuria, its ephemeral state and emperor. He retreated to the south. People sometimes ask why Joseon, without departing from the Mongols, went on to the north to their homeland in Manchuria, and to the south. The answer is very simple. Manchuria lived 3 million people and south of China, in the south of northern China, but there was probably 35 million if not more population. In front of Sun consisted of 48 million people, 3 million in Manchuria, everything else in China. And the Balkai, it was in the basin of the Yellow River to the south of the Yellow River. So the emperor retreated. Where was the source of financial and military power? It was possible to resist and Manchuria, but he was doing, even given the fact that there were his relatives Jerry, there were radical home. He retreated to the south, made its capital, but Haiyan seemed in 1215 that the future of Gens no 1st of June, do lost the north and cut off almost same. Facing the imminent fall of the appeal came from the banks of breaking dams from flush several million, tax-paying population causing severe famine and desperate disasters. throughout the state brought to the last natural disaster, and the invasion of the Mongols, who just destroyed the Chinese and cleared the field under their future pasture, as well as cutting military and economic power of the enemy Chinese peasants. In a short Dunya rebelled. They broke out a powerful rebellion, Red Jackets, which are equally as fiercely fought with the Mongols. So from Georgian cow troops of the empire Jin, not only of the west, the empire was attacked. Their Guta, who was not forgiven by a slightly female monarch for contemptuously refusing help when the Guta turned to them there during the first invasion of Genghis Khan, and with Yoga, the fearful Hans, and the southern Song, who for a long time could not understand who was finally winning there in the north, finally decided that their terrible enemy had brought them to their knees quite recently in 1208. Those who had to pay a colossal tribute were defeated, and the time came to return the ancestral Chinese lands. The southern Song also attacked the empire for Georgia and did not find themselves isolated. And in this situation it turned out that the people still had the inner core and strength to rise, rally, gather all their willpower and continue to resist the emperor. They zoom in from afar, sent to him as the overseer, and one road che anyone anchor and the road. And th from the word road, that is the road. This is a very salient point of the matter, is that in ancient times, map thinking characteristic of today was not the common people perceived the geography through the lens roads. That time there is such a map, and ancient times from Rome where different roads marked, along with as in addition. It turns out these long drawn lines, the whole map on one of the turns, the multimeter, is placed about as we were walking, and the Chinese and the Mongols, and they appointed commissioners, that such firing in the direction of the road east, road 0, and thus another turn of the first, purely another launch. After the Hao-Jeans have failed in an attempt to entice, or any on its side, diplomacy, armed bribery, they attacked the armed forces, were defeated with the help of the Mongols, retreated to a fortress. For Yuan joined their ranks again, attacked and again defeated. After that, the king general of the army let the tub, knowing the habit the emperor Shimodzo, knack execution of defeated generals, proclaimed himself emperor himself, separated and created a state, which is called to give life to the first minister. He appointed some hobo who influenced him with magic, but overall it was a farce. But of course it did, however, complicated the situation in Manchuria more. The end. The Mongols defeated this Bath, let them who fled to Korea then call with measles, and thus involved the country in the depths of the Far Eastern policy. But all people managed to unite under his power, the practical power of the monkeys in this the time, throwing proud of his background, and remember the glorious past of the Iron Empire. La tire to knock it to rebel against Genghis Khan, but for people who knew what ends with the betrayal of the Mongols. Instead, he went in search of Genghis and brought him 90 wagons of gold, silver and silk fabrics. Genghis Khan was extremely happy with, took guests feel very welcome. And when I heard that, in the absence of people of Chinese generals, supporters of independence rebelled and took the wife of the ruler, and he saw how the panic or the people, he approached him, but was looking for something really. My horses in the body of the army we will refund you a capital dinner. You will also refund, and ordered the fly whether to suppress the rebellion in Korea. Led Magyori damn man neighbor that he died to flower heavenly paradise. On the head collapsed at this moment. This gave you a little precision. She was involved in orbit large and global political upheavals. The fact that in Korea there was just another palace coup, were executed around 800 Buddhist monks of the order, was in a disassembled state. It was invaded by the troops of Chinese rebels who fought against Julius League and the Mongols. They went volumes than the entire peninsula and burned the Korean capital is of Van. That is the king of Korea with fear fled to neighboring the Gangwon Island, separated from the mainland by a narrow but nonetheless violent and rugged strait, and hid there. Koreans tried to ask for help to southern Sun, does not understand absolutely who attacked them and why. But it is clear that the southern Song-an could not help them. But instead they appeared on the peninsula. Yulia people who pursued their rebels defeated them, and at the same time demanded from the Korean subordination of Genghis Khan. Korean doesn't behave nowhere aid agreed, and Mongol envoys appeared in Korean say they were absolutely terrible, demanded in obedience, grabbed his hands, go. When passed to Genghis Khan, but where was to go Koreans here? Another feature of such Mongols admired the beauty of Korean women. Cotton tour favorite is on Genghis Khan was considered so beautiful because it was similar to the brisket, and they were the crowds to capture the woman to send their slaves as concubines and wives, just as a servant in Mongolia. It was probably the worst Mongolian tax which was imposed on the bark. However, Khan's Kagan instead to resist and sat down on the island, leaving will to his fate, and do not see support nowhere to their government. Koreans for some time stoically endured the humiliation of England, and then they revolted in 1223. When the fly dies, or within 10 years. We do not depend on killing the Mongol garrisons because in Mongolia, in fact, no one cared about Korea. Only in 1233, the new year, when they would remember about this peninsula, would require the general to start. So this is not a Simbat, and it just had to subjugate the country to the Mongol authorities, which is here. He will do it by breaking into the peninsula after two devastating campaigns. He will force Japan to submit, and Korea stands Mongol in the rest of the territory. This will happen almost simultaneously with the generation of Russia in 1238. As I said at that time, meanwhile, events took place on Mollusk in the expanses on the hills of Manchuria, and on the hills of Manchuria, which ended with Haley targeting the Biden fortress, which was located 150 kilometers to the west. And now, I was a huge city occupied by numerous rebellious Chinese troops, who took this city of Shima. The loss was certainly very great, but he showed the weakness and vulnerability of the Empire Jin from attack from the south. If to circumvent them through a treatment center, where you are on the shore Huanghai, the north were many fortresses built Georgi him, but if through the valley of the river in and break through the mountains to the south, and outstab in the back, judging that they were defenseless, so it was planned strategy, which is then will lead to the Mongols to victory. But victory was far away, because the Mongols by a very strong swearing favorite Genghis Khan era hood ear. Somehow scary he disliked the ear and spread on it a nasty rumor, like that in his youth had sex with a goat, and the steppes Hudir incidentally was dried incompetent man, that he has lost the battle did Zen in Afghanistan. But Genghis Khan somehow reacted to this very quietly, not punished him, and the dance you were the hero of talented nugget, but apparently schemer you ate him, because after his amazing heroic epic with only a dam at the rear of the Georgi, it just disappeared from chronicles. His Mongolian more never appeared in the story. Maybe he was wounded and died of disease, can be poisoned him well-wisher, it is unknown in general. It disappears the pages of history. Crater all envision sent ambassadors Genghis Khan with a request for peace. Genghis Khan laid down conditions to give him all the land north of the Yellow River, to renounce the imperial title, and to be referred to simply Hanami King Zhuang. Khan flatly refused. He was ready to cede the territories, but not the title, and yet the medieval idea that the mandate is not and served as a source of power. If we will give the mandate of heaven of Genghis Khan, he will have a source of power, and then who will Georgia? And how they will exist in the China incandescent hatred of the country. That hated invaders hated the Mongols, and the hair atrocities hated Georgieri, who for 100 years before that own you the same atrocities were doing. So the war continued, increasing exasperation. Since understood the threat was sent to the river valley, you and a large force, so there was very long bloody battle. In the end booze there tore his health. When he took 70 to fortress tired, sent Genghis Khan a message saying that he can no longer fight on. Through Khan said, "You can't retire until take as many fortresses." Buz obeyed and died, and North China was left without a commander. During the second phase of the war between the Kingdom of in Mongolia, deprived of the Mongols' unified command center. Not only that, they have not found a replacement for him. Kolin Pastukov Bath states, in northern China, so they have the Great Khan was not a few years, and almost commanders of the Mongol forces in China were left to themselves, and among them there was not one who could be compared with GPS and BMD or fly. Whether in the military art, by this Chinese counterattack won several victories over the Mongols in general. Any speed one smashed Mongolian detachment in the battlefield, which caused a burst of enthusiasm in the women's camp. There were other wins. Several Assad was successfully repulsed by Giorgione and captured from several important fortresses, and during this interregnum somewhere in 1220 for 1229 years, a significant part of Hebei province, chance obnoxious, was able to gain control, but at the end of this period Skull the son was away, and his successor in northern China before while the room, he died young, was able to organize a counterattack and embossing. Mind you, it is the same with the territory Hebei. Almost he threw them back to line king fortresses in which they held for several years, and then when I hit it came to power began last phase of the war, which the native raid ended with the empire in 1213. Began the walk against them. South of these Jurchen goals there were 3 columns. The first column and kept throw itself took place in Shaanxi, moving north Yellow River. Is the second column headed the Teeth and Bagatahi, acted in the district Shandong, and finally the main impact struck the column that catches about 30,000 riders Tolo and went the way he broke through Qingyuan and burst in the Hajjok, this city in southern China. This is the Hojun about it. I told you when we talk about the war jugs whether it is against Samara, and this is the exact same Hunter. Those most places only now North Schliemann naked in the south defended the state's South Tolo amount that passed through the mountain range of prices. Lingxi broke in Sichuan, came here kind place where the mountains of Tibet. Then he turned and went out through the South China possessions from the south to Hernania to Kaif, and he reached Kaif, and we stayed 7 kilometers away from the capital of Virginia. Panic began against the crowd. All the forces of the Jude Women's Empire of Tolo were thrown and stopped at the Tongguan mountain pass, followed by Kaif itself. But this mountainous, the gorge, has also always been a place where all sorts of battles were constantly taking place in Chinese history. He tried to lure the Jins out of an open place, but they did not go for this trick and gave up in despair. He walked almost 600 miles. He ran out of food. The soldiers were terribly tired. They, the Guts, who were his allies, left, saying that they no longer had forces and auxiliary troops of Tunguska to fight, and fled. And 2 states, Sciences Alphen was a huge city where they ran almost 1 million refugees and peasants of the surrounding. There was a large stockpile of food, with 60 large towers with fortifications around them, which sat a powerful Georgian Kal garrison. There was drugs and its Hunan. And when it became the heat, then went illness before cholera and plague, and drawing hope that diseases of Mongolian army ravaged and war-torn edge. But they became mangled to fall into this trap. Guess that Louis began to move to the Mongolian steppe. Orders to kill Jenny Misu would give Bogota, and because it was necessary such to happen that bare BDI nothing happened with Rim, and an example of strict measures against the spread of the infection, and saved his troops. But retreating all will return. You call the Mongolian dear she's somewhere this infection picked up, and ill himself Great Khan of Coal Melt, which is adored brother in despair prayed and spent such a large ritual tengri. So he moved a disease and to the Great Khan recovered, and then coal and shot the atoll and is sick, and 3 days later he died in terrible agony. This is the official pious legend. But the jury does not a historian by nihilist, which in general is very well written about the Mongols. He outlined another version. He said that Melt died from drinking. It is known that he was severe alcoholic and boozed Chinese wine. He just couldn't leave from a hangover anyway, but the greatest outstanding Mongol warlord, after Genghis Khan, is the most talented of his sons, was dead stealing till my hair ripped. His scanty beard didn't know how to mourn a brother, but finally he decided created a special honor, his wife Taloi variety acts of Becky, and highlighted his sons, and the sons of Beta Bunker Kul Lag what sons each of them. Then will be held for what harem family Taloi in the end will inherit Tron Great, but it will be later, but for now the army Subutai surrounded by the Buzz. And 1230 to began the siege of the great city. The first attempt to break into was over the fact that the Mongols raided on narrow streets the Buzz where they mercilessly destroyed the barricades, desperately fought the Chinese. Then the Teeth Del proceeded to blockade the city. Famine attempt to break and export to the Mongols affected, then the number of the assault became clearer that high and well not to resist. Especially it became clear after Subutai Bagata built circus, shaft dark line. Is 54 miles in length, it is a 2 times more than the strengthening of Caesar under Alessi. And it is absolutely unprecedented the construction of siege here. These walls, the walls around the Buzz, and dotted with towers, which was Kamnanosov. All these towers name left a constant struggle with the defenders, city Subutai used against kicks and all possible technical innovations in iron pots filled with gunpowder that was called all those spider, which exploded with a terrible raw hitting fragments of cast iron pots punching armor, any armor, and destroy a powerful stone walls name machinery, which smashed adobe walls of the Chinese in the depth 7 meters, but the walls to their fins were 20 meters thick, so they are still held. When the Emperor Azu realized that to fight on he can't, the city is breached, along with a detachment of guards escaped and ran away from the Buzz, and the Mongols rushed in pursuit of him, caught on the crossing of the Grip, and cut to pieces all escort and all the men with whom Azu escaped from the Buzz, and he only small number of satellites managed to get to town Sideshow, which has become the last refuge of Zainsk Cook pirates of the High. And not the same after learning that the emperor fled. Generals decided coup and entered into negotiations with the Tooth has put forward the most severe conditions. That is impossible. I have to tell you not to forget. Then say that the gardens here, because of the plague which raged around the Buzz and the more than a few times off the siege and left, and sometimes you can even find the expression that the first assault failed. But was there a storm? The reality first the assault kicks, and we guessed 1230 to ended in defeat. After of this shot the siege, and departed, regrouped again, approached the city. After that the blockade is not stopped, but in fact it is all still. It was almost one, and to say that there is not here won't have. And so after this coup, the commander of the new commander of the DJS gave Prince's family Bunyan Teeth layer and surrendered the city. 500 principal was executed. The princess was sent to Mongolia, and on the road defiantly raped. Entered the city the troops of the Mongols, who taught there a terrible massacre. Teeth give Bagot a guess who treated indifferently. At least he had the precarious position. Despite all his achievements, he had to play politics and to defend the position at the top of the Mongol Empire. He decided to do it as a defender of the style, the Mongol orders of magnitude. In addition, he himself was a soldier characterized by extreme brutality. He suggested year to cut the entire population of Buzz and then made against him, or to learn, and took place in the very famous dialogue, which is often tells her it is necessary. It to the time of Genghis Khan concerns about what to destroy all Chinese, and may there be pasture for our horses. It was a real program too.